Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Saturday, January 21st. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 224 days. The game against Michigan in 308 days. If you listened to yesterday's show, you have already heard us do a deep dive on the Ohio State 2 Deep for the spring. Headed into the spring, at least where things stand right now as of this exact moment, things are changing quite a bit. Today, we're going to do the defense. We're going to do the same ridiculous exercise we tried yesterday with the sands shifting underneath our feet as always. But my guest again, Tony Gerdeman, BuckeyeHuddle.com. He's been kind of trying to keep an ongoing list of who he thinks, where he thinks the 2 Deep stands. This is kind of a difficult exercise in the middle of the season, Tony, because Ohio State doesn't release a 2 Deep anymore. It's an even more difficult exercise this time of year when you've got more guys coming in, guys going out, positional switches potentially, uncertainty, guys maybe playing multiple positions this spring as they sort of try to figure things out. But I guess let's start with an easy one. Defensive end, one of the defensive end positions, strong side defensive end, Tony. I like your choice here. I like both of your choices, actually. But JT Tuimoloau feels like a solid pick to start at defensive end, and Caden Curry feels like a pretty darn good guess as to who's going to be behind him there.
Yeah, I think you're going to be looking at mostly a 3-man rotation at defensive end, and 2 of those guys being JT Tuimoloau and Caden Curry. This one feels pretty sure, even though Caden Curry may end up at the other side. Who knows? But I think I put him here because got to put him somewhere, and he's going to be one of the he's going to play a lot, Caden Curry, but so is JT Tuimoloau. So those are 2 pretty easy guys to put in a lineup somewhere. I am expecting, JT Tuimoloau. I know a lot of people are saying he's going to come off the bench. Tom, you in particular are saying he's probably not even going to play. I think he's going to start next year.
Hey, save it for the bold prediction shows. This is just regular takes now, not hot takes. JT Tuimoloau, yes, going to play next year. I guess let's jump to the other defensive end spot, and this is kind of tricky. We were talking before the show because they have the jack position. But sometimes the jack position plays when both defensive ends are out there, and sometimes the jack position is just the weak side defensive end. So it's kind of, there's not a real easy, these guys are definitely going to be the jacks, and these guys are definitely going to be the strong side guys, and never the twain shall cross. You've got Jack Sawyer, and you get Mitchell Melton, who had a very promising spring last year, and then tore his knee in the spring game and missed the whole season. And you got Kenyatta Jackson, who was a very promising recruit last year, played a little bit, but didn't get a lot of time. Where, I feel like Jack Sawyer is probably the very, very safe bet to start there. But, after that, you kind of got some questions. It feels like Caden Curry is much more of a sure thing as the number 2 option on the other side.
Yeah, and Caden Curry may very well end up on either side. And that's why I say there's a definitive 3-man rotation there. And I think one of the reasons, if there are more guys, there's not a lot of defensive ends, frankly, on the roster at this point that you would put into a 2 deep. And I think maybe with last year's, you could break it down strong side, weak side, and jack. And this, I think we know Jack Sawyer has played there. Mitchell Melton was getting some run there before he got injured. But even Jim Knowles said, I think during camp, even JT Tuimoloau would have some interesting tools that he could use at that position. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. And who knows, does this eventually become a position where it's maybe not just Jack Sawyer's position? Is there somebody else that they can use in that role? Basically, again, remember, it's initially designed to be a disruptor against the run. So does that become a linebacker? Does that become Cody Simon? Does that become Sonny Styles? I'm not saying these guys are defensive ends. I'm saying, can they do something to interrupt the process of an offense? And I think a lot of these guys can, but for now, Jack Sawyer, and I feel like I don't know that we necessarily need the or there, but Jack Sawyer, Mitchell Melton, I think are your 2 jacks at this point. I'm interested to see what Kenyatta Jackson can become in year 2. Talking with Larry Johnson at the Peach Bowl, and I compared him. I said, he's one of these guys that you use as the before and after photos, 4 or 5 years down the road. He's you can already see the change that he's going through. So I don't know that he's necessarily a jack, but go ahead and pencil him in there somewhere, perhaps in that 2 deep, because they really, really like his ability to rush the passer.
All right, now let's slide inside to the 3-tech spot. And here are two names that every Ohio State, just bring a smile to every Ohio State fan's face, unless there's asking why don't they play more, which was a rather frequent question last year. Mike Hall, Tyleik Williams. Tony, you're projecting them to play more. So congratulations. You just made pretty much every Ohio State fan online very happy.
And the thing here is, I personally have moved Mike Hall from nose tackle to 3 technique. I did not alert Larry Johnson of this just yet. But the way I see it finishing up this year and projecting into next year with Ty Hamilton and Mike Hall perhaps being your two best defensive tackles, why have them play the same position? So I have split them up and now I have Mike Hall at 3 tech with Tyleik Williams behind him, but they should be rotating and playing a bunch. I think 3 years in, this being Tyleik Williams' third year, he should finally be able to put it all together. And as I wrote on the board, if he can't, having Mike Hall there is pretty good insurance. So now it's also going to force Larry Johnson to play Mike Hall more, which isn't a bad thing. So I think those two guys are very disruptive, kind of designed for that position. They can make plays. And so I like having them together, or not necessarily together, but at that same spot, they can just rotate each other. And I think that keeps them both fresh. And you've got two disruptors there.
And, those are two guys who played 10-ish snaps in a lot of games last year, maybe fewer in some cases. If you're, even if you're splitting time there, that's more like 30, 35 snaps probably for them next year each, which, big guys are not going to be able to go 60 snaps. That's just not how that position usually works. And so, you're getting a lot more of both of them. We'll see if Larry Johnson and the defensive coaching staff agrees, but I definitely see the logic there. As far as the remaining guys at nose tackle, you mentioned Ty Hamilton. You got him number 1, Hero Kanu number 2. He is just, he really didn't play a whole heck of a lot last year, but he has just, even from watching him at camp as a high schooler when he came over from Germany and was at Ohio State summer camp in 2021, he's just a big dude, big, athletic. He feels like someone who, okay, you've had your year with Coach Mick. Now it's time to go step out on the field and start to make an impact at that nose position.
Yeah, and when I talked to him in Atlanta, I asked him what his best traits were, and he said his strength and his power. And so to me, that speaks to a nose tackle. And we haven't seen enough of him to know exactly where he's going to play. And I'm not even sure if I asked Larry Johnson about that, because when they're so young like this, they play both positions. They bounce back and forth. You don't want to pigeonhole him into one spot, but of course I will. And just put him here at nose tackle behind Ty Hamilton. To me, Ty Hamilton did fairly well this year, and they showed how much faith they had in him by continuing to play him. And he took the job and ran with it when Mike Hall was down and injured. And, they put Jerron Cage basically on the bench because Ty Hamilton kept playing. So I assume he's going to be the guy at nose tackle. Will I be shocked if it's still Ty Hamilton and Mike Hall? No. But I think Hamilton has done enough now. And as you said, Tom, you want to see what Hero Kanu can do. You want to see what these young guys can do. The only way to find out is to put him out there. I would expect him to do pretty well in the spring. I won't be surprised if he's one of those guys that we hear about when, Tom, when you start hearing about guys, pretty early on or before camp, like during workouts like now. And I won't be surprised if he's one of those names we start hearing about.
Frankly, I think you might hear a bunch about the whole defensive line, especially the interior guys, because of the stuff we talked about on yesterday's show, where there's not a lot of proven anything on the offensive line. There's definitely not a lot of proven depth on the offensive line. So you're going to potentially see, hear a lot about how disruptive the interior of that defensive line has been during scrimmages and stuff. Then you see how much that plays out in the fall. Because sometimes, when you're going against your own teammates, sometimes it's good news for one side and bad news for another side. So we'll see how much that ends up playing out in the fall. But I definitely think that Hero Kanu is the kind of guy who should be able to be, at least have a role on this team this fall, and could grow into a bigger role as things go. Let's move to the linebacker position. Only 2 spots. We're not going to bother with a Sam because they really don't play a Sam very much, but we're going to talk about the Will and the Mike. Let's start with the Will. Number one, no, not really a question, Steel Chambers. But right behind him, 5-star, came in last year, didn't play much, if at all, on defense, but was a key guy on special teams all season long, which is generally a pretty good indication that you're going to be a player on defense pretty soon, and that's C.J. Hicks.
Yeah, and I don't have Chip Trainum here. I have him staying at running back for now, although based on our discussion on Thursday or Friday, maybe that changes because of how deep that running back position is. But this seems pretty cut and dry to me. At that will position, Steel Chambers started last year, will start again. He'll be a 3-year starter at this point, and so he's not going anywhere. C.J. Hicks, the heir apparent to that guy, just waiting in the wings. I think we'll get some snaps, kind of like Jerome Baker did, Malik Harrison did. We're able to get in there and play some. Real quick, back to hearing names in the Hero Canoe. Last year was my call, and so how did that turn out? And so just to throw that back out there, but yeah, I think that one's pretty easy. That might be the easiest pick projection of the entire offense and defense.
And, you go back to last year, we got to watch some of the practices early in the fall. It's like, boy, that Ohio State the interior of the defensive line is really, really given the interior of the offensive line fits. And is that a good thing for the defense or a bad thing for the offense? It turned out that interior of the Ohio State offensive line was pretty darn good last year especially when they were healthy. So that was more of a statement on the defensive line and some of those guys on the interior of the defensive line. So it is not necessarily bad news if you hear it, just to make sure you understand that this is, are the wide receivers good or the corners bad? And the answer can, sometimes just be, yeah, the wide receivers are good. And sometimes it can be the defensive line is really good. So that's why we'll, something to kind of monitor throughout the course of the spring. Something else to monitor at the course of the spring, the Mike position. This is another easy one. Tommy Eichenberg is back. So therefore Tommy Eichenberg is the starter there. What's kind of interesting is Cody Simon, because Cody Simon has been there quite a while, and Tommy Eichenberg has really sort of solidified himself at that Mike position. So, is Cody Simon, is Cody Simon willing to play whatever role they have for him at Mike? And, if Eichenberg gets hurt, he steps in. But, if those two guys are on the roster at the start of the season, boy, that's a pretty good pair at Mike.
It'll be interesting to see, because Cody Simon he started more than Tommy Eichenberg in 2021. Will he be okay playing as much as he did this year, next year? Like, is that enough for him? Or does he want to go and be a starter again? And so that will be interesting to watch this spring, how he chooses to proceed. But I think you get Tommy Eichenberg back, a second-team All-American. Whatever happens behind him. He's tough. He's going to play through whatever he can. And to get him back is, you'll take that every single day of the week. And he could become Ohio State's first-team All-American linebacker since Brian Shazier in 2013. So a decade in the making, basically.
Yeah, he is. Having him back, I think, was one of those really big deals that, the guys at the top of the list, and C.J. Stroud leaving and Paris Johnson leaving, and Jackson Smith and Jigba leaving, the guys who are the projected first round picks, that got a lot of attention. Getting Tommy Eichenberg back feels like something that there will be a game next year where having Tommy Eichenberg back is a really, really, really big deal. So that having the sky may be the limit there for him in terms of accolades and all that coming into 2023. Let's move on to the secondary. Let's start at the corner positions. This is another easy one. It feels like, with J.K. Johnson leaving, it feels like there is a pretty clear top three, at least. This is a little like the defensive end positions. One of the corner positions, you got Denzel Burke 1, Jair Brown 2, and it feels like coming out of last season, those are pretty clearly two of the top three corners in this rotation, at least right now.
Yeah, and as I'm looking at it now, I feel like you could probably put Jair Brown as an or at one of those two spots to start, because, as you said, he's going to be one of the top three. But Denzel Burke, say what you want about him. He's been a 2-year starter now. I think he played a lot better down the stretch and got some things worked out. I expect him to be the starter at corner. I feel like he's the best bet to start at corner. Jair Brown, I think everybody was impressed with. I know I was. He came in the way he did and got a start and played well in the start. Him and J.K. Johnson both starting in the same game because Cam Brown and Denzel Burke both missed the same game against Wisconsin. Played well. Would not shock me if he ends up winning the job, winning a job. But right now, I have him as a backup. And again, to call him a backup, I don't know if that's fair. He might just be a guy in the rotation. But again, we don't know how much Tim Walton, Perry Eliano want to rotate in the secondary. It's not been something that they've been able to do or wanted to do, perhaps. But again, with as many injuries as they had last year, could they have rotated if they wanted to? Because they never really had. Did they ever have 3 healthy guys that they trusted at one point during the season? I don't know if they did. So if they do next year, might we see a 3-man rotation?
Yeah, you very well could, but again, based on the fact that was the first year for those guys, and it was just kind of like, well, who's still standing upright? Okay, you two guys go out there. That was a corner room for a good chunk of the 2022 season. If they have a little more health this year, and it seems statistically very unlikely that their health results will be as bad as they were last year. So they should, just on the balance of probability, should have better health luck at corner this year, and we will finally get the answer to that question. The other side at corner, one of the guys who was banged up a whole bunch, he missed a bunch of fall camp, really missed the first chunk of the season, but someone they have really liked since he came in, and that's Jordan Hancock. It is, the deck is finally clear for him to be a clear-cut number 1 starter at one of those cornerback positions. And then behind him, boy, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of guys who you've heard positive things about. Jermaine Matthews was just named a 5-star by On3. Calvin Simpson-Hunt was one of those names that at the All-American game, you kept hearing good things about Calvin Simpson-Hunt and how he could be an immediate impact guy. And then Ryan Turner, who was also out there last year. I think he had a sack in the Toledo game. He got on the stat sheet in a couple different places, didn't play as much. He was certainly not in that top group last year, but with another year of experience, he could be in that group as well. And, this feels like a very clear, okay, Jordan Hancock, you've got your clear top 3. He's one of those top 3, along with the 2 guys we just talked about. And then after that, there's a whole bunch of young talent, and you just kind of see who ends up taking that next step.
Yeah, and talking earlier about the minutia and the seriousness, quote unquote, that I take this with, I think maybe I need to change Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke and have Denzel Burke the de facto starter with all of these young guys behind him, and have Jair Brown and Jordan Hancock as an or for that next spot. I think that makes more sense, and I'm glad I found that and that nobody else pointed that out to me. But you're going to need a second young guy to step up and help formulate that 2 deep. And Jermaine Matthews being in the spring, I think gives him a heads up over Calvin Simpson-Hunt, who won't get here till the summer. And I keep comparing that to Denzel Burke versus Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson. Denzel Burke got in early in 2021. Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson did not. And you saw what happened. Denzel Burke ended up starting as a true freshman. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Jermaine Matthews. I'm just saying that gives them a leg up. And of course, Brian Turner, as you said, got some work in. He's going to have more experience than anybody else. But I think they really like these 2 corners that they brought in, and they should. And I wouldn't be surprised to see either of those guys end up in a 2 deep.
All right, now let's move back to the safety spots, and there's going to be a lot of new names here. One name you're not going to hear is Josh Proctor. Josh Proctor's status is still kind of up in the air. He hasn't said he's coming back. He hasn't said he's leaving. So he's a little bit of a question mark. So we're just going to kind of skip over him for now until we have a little more definitive answer there. But let's start at the nickel. One guy we do know who's going to be there is Jihad Carter. He transferred from Syracuse. He's going to be in. He's going to be in for the spring, is my understanding. And then he and Cam Martinez kind of battling for that nickel job. Tanner McAllister came in last year as a transfer, did a pretty solid job there. Is it Cam Martinez time? Will Jihad Carter be another guy who transfers in and makes that, takes that starting job away at nickel? This is one of those spots where it feels like having 2 potential answers is better than one.
Yeah, it's definitely better than one. And, talking to Cameron Martinez in Atlanta, and he realized the up and down season that he had. But like a lot of guys, you learn from it and you apply it and you become better for it. And I think he'll also be made better by this likely competition with Jihad Carter, and Jihad Carter played all over the secondary for Syracuse, played all three safety spots, and I think the bulk of those came in the slot. So he's a guy who's bigger than Martinez, 6'2", like 198, can maybe handle maybe some more of the run aspect of the defense. And I think those two guys give them a pretty good chance of meeting or exceeding what Tanner McAllister was able to do in 2022. I do also wonder what happens with that position and how they make it a more versatile thing with other aspects to it. You know, whether when it becomes a third linebacker, when it becomes a bigger safety like Sonny Styles against Georgia, I think there's still some things to come there where it's not always just going to be that nickelback, one of those two guys. They're going to be doing some different things as they did as a third linebacker or a bigger safety. So that's something I don't know how much we'll see of that in the spring, but it's something we will see more of during the season.
All right, so now let's move back to that free safety spot and a familiar name there, Lathan Ransom. He will be back. He's moved around a little bit from safety position to safety position. He and Kai Stokes, the two guys you've got there, if this is a little like the offensive line, if you have if Kai Stokes really takes a leap forward, could you keep Lathan Ransom at the strong safety spot, or do you move him back to the free safety spot? Where is he a better fit? I mean, you'll have people making arguments on both sides of that, that potential discussion. But those, feels like those two guys, wherever they are, those two guys are going to be absolutely in the rotation for Ohio State this fall, one way or another.
Yeah, and Lathan Ransom wants to play one of those two deep safety spots. He prefers that to the slot where he's had to play earlier in his career. I have him here because he understands the defense, and being that free safety, being that adjuster, you got to make calls, and him having been around, although I guess he's been in Jim Knowles' defense as long as Kai Stokes has, but he's just a more veteran player, perhaps able to process things quicker. But I definitely think this is all up for grabs. You can't just, okay, this is your job. These guys are going to go win it. And if Kai Stokes ends up, he was the talk of spring ball. And if he continues to be the talk of spring ball this spring and then into camp, I think he has a much better opportunity to win a job than he did last year as a true freshman over to a third-year guy and a fourth-year guy in Ronnie Hickman and Lathan Ransom. Like, he has a much better opportunity, much better chance, much better odds to win a job this year than he did last year. And now that he knows the defense and can apply that with his athleticism and his just natural nose for the football, I'm expecting to see him on the field more than just as a backup. I think there are ways to get more guys on the field, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that they find a way for.
And if those two guys do stick it free, then the strong safety position comes down to, you've got Sonny Styles and Malik Hartford, which is, a true freshman coming in as a backup. That would be pretty significant. You also had a note that, where's Court Williams? Well, is Court Williams going to be healthy this spring? That all of these are kind of open questions. And, he has been banged up so much that you don't really know for sure where he's going to end up if and when he is back and healthy. So that's kind of an open question. But, Sonny Styles and Malik Hartford, boy, if you have Kai Stokes and Sonny Styles back there in some combination, boy, you want to talk about making the Ohio State internet happy. That will be two of the more intriguing, perhaps exciting, interesting prospects that they have back there. Those are two guys who I think have gotten a lot of attention, and the good side of losing some of the guys that they have lost who have been good solid players for them. It's not like it's an addition by subtraction thing. It is, well, now you get to see the young, exciting new guys, and there's going to be a learning curve there. But that I think when you hear Jim Knowles talk about Sonny Styles as a secret weapon, it's like, okay, it's okay to be a little bit excited.
Well, and the thing that you could also see with that secret weapon, as you're moving Sonny Styles around, you're moving Lathan Ransom back to the boundary, and you're putting Kai Stokes on the field. And so, like, you have these moving parts that these three guys, a lot of them can play together. I do think, as you're saying this, if the NCAA football game, college football game, video game was out this year, the bulk of the Ohio State fans would probably be changing that depth chart so that Kai Stokes is your free safety, Sonny Styles is your strong safety, and then you go from there and you just have some fun with that. But I think, the ability for these guys to move around, and Lathan Ransom having played everywhere allows you to move him around as you need. And then if Sonny Styles is this secret weapon, go ahead and showcase that. But also, if he can play safety, he needs to play. Are you going to just not use him for 2 years and then finally break him out as a junior? Seems kind of a waste to go sign a 5-star safety and then never find a home for him. So you need to find out if he can play. He absolutely believes he can play safety. I think having him at strong safety gives them an opportunity to do that. Moving Lathan Ransom to free safety seems like it makes sense. But again, the versatility of these guys, I think you'll see them all play.
Well, so there you have it. The definitive answer to who is going to start, who's going to be the backups for that first game against Indiana. Absolutely no questions, no variation, no hesitation at all. There it is. Sorry, should have issued a spoiler alert at the top of the show. But just in case, in the unlikely event that something does change between now and the early September, a great place to track all of those changes will be at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where Tony, as we said on yesterday's show, Tony has been updating this kind of periodically, and sometimes like day to day as different editions come in. It's going to be a very busy spring, very interesting spring with a quarterback battle, safety battle, offensive line battle, lots of open positions on the line for Ohio State this spring, with lots of promising young players looking to fill those spots. So going to be a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. And the best place to talk about all of it is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Our insider board, our huddle board there has lots of topics on this, lots of topics on recruiting, which should be a big recruiting weekend for Ohio State. They've got a bunch of juniors in this weekend, so should have a lot to talk about that as well, with Alex Gleitman and Mark Giffler on recruiting, Tony, Kevin, and I covering the team, our whole crew of X's and O's guys, Ross and Justin and Devin and all those guys covering X's and O's, and a really fun, fantastic community there that you can be a part of at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, do us a favor, hit the thumbs up button on this one. They will help other folks find these videos that we're making and encourage us to make more, because sometimes it requires a little encouragement to get Tony to do this stuff. But by hitting thumbs up, by commenting, "Hey Tony, great job," that's the best way to make him do more stuff. So help me out, help him out. Give us a thumbs up, give us a comment. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. Hit that bell, and make sure you're a part of all the fun stuff we're doing at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.